friends, this is Alicia with the Pigeon Letters design team, and I'm back with another tutorial for you. So this time we're going for another travel theme as I usually do, and this one is a desert landscape that we're going to make up by using some botanical plants and cacti and things that are found in Peggy's book, Botanical Line Drawing. So if you're interested in learning how to do this, let's go. So the first thing that we need for the tutorial would be the book I just mentioned, Botanical Line Drawing, Cactus and Succulent Edition. It's by Peggy Dean, and it's awesome because she really walks you through step by step how to draw so many different types of cacti and succulents. It makes it so easy. So if you feel like you're stuck and you just have trouble trying to figure out how to start to draw something, I mean, each step, she just makes it so easy. So we'll use this. If you want to follow along and do the exact plants that I've selected, I will have page numbers for you. Or feel free to go through the book and find your favorites and pick whichever ones that you want. The next thing we need are paintbrushes. And I've got this collection of round brushes from the Pigeon Letters. I am using a variety of sizes just because we have larger parts of the scene that are going to require a larger brush, and then you have smaller bits that are going to be a lot easier with one of these tiny brushes. The liner is great for getting these little lines here or doing something like that. So having a variety of sizes is really helpful. If you don't have a variety of sizes, just grab what you can. Yeah, so that's what we need. We need brushes. The next thing we do is, because we're combining watercolor and ink, we need the ink part. So that would be these amazing Pigeon Letters monoline pens, and I finally got my hands on them. They have been out of stock, so difficult to get, and with good reason, because, as I will show you very carefully, the tip on these is rounded. A lot of kind of fine liner pens will be flat, completely flat on the bottom, so when you draw, you really have to keep them completely up and down in order to get ink to come out. But these are great because they're rounded, so you can hold it more naturally and the ink will still flow and you won't end up scratching the page. It gets really frustrating. So if you can get your hands on those, which they should be back in stock now, definitely get those. The next thing we need for this project is watercolor. I've gone for a more realistic look to this, but feel free to pull whatever colors you want, make it completely unrealistic. Do you want pink cacti and succulents? Amazing, go for it. So pull whatever colors you want. You'll want a cup of clean water, a rag, and all that stuff that you typically use for watercolor, including paper. And I will show you that I'm using this block. It's available in the Pigeon Letters store, and it's nice because all the sides are sealed together, so you don't have curled edges as you paint. The next thing might be pretty new to you. It's masking fluid. I'll get a little bit into it and what it is later, but if you have it, great. If you don't, you don't need it for the project, but I do think that it's helpful. And also, when you're using masking fluid, always, always, always use an old brush. Do not use a good brush. Do not use your Pigeon Letters brushes for this. This is the one time I will tell you, do not use a Pigeon Letters project or product, because masking fluid will ruin your brushes. It is rubbery and gummy, and even from the first use, it's going to get up in your bristles here. You can see how hard they are. So this, I use this specifically for masking fluid. Don't use your good brushes. Just use an old cheap brush just for that. So yeah, we went over, we have pens, we have paint, we have the book, we have masking fluid, an old brush. I think that's everything we need for the project. So let's dive in. I should have also mentioned that we need a pencil and an eraser, but that might go without saying as we dive into this next step. So take your watercolor paper, your pencil, and the Botanical Line Drawing book, and I will give you the page numbers for the exact trees that I've drawn. So the first one will be page, let me find it, I think 97. Page 97, I drew the Joshua tree, which is this one right here. Zoomed in a little bit more, so there we go. I have page 77 for the Tuna Cardona. I'll be honest, I always thought this was a prickly pear, and apparently it is not. So that was the other one. I have page 75 for the ball cactus, page 73 for the saguaro, and then the last plant I chose was on page 113, which is called a desert spoon. So you can follow along and use the exact same plants I did, or pick whichever ones you want. So let's go back to, I'm going to start with the Joshua tree, which was page 97. Okay, here we go. So in the book, you'll see that Peggy has walked you step by step to show you each bit of the way to get to the final illustration, which is really great because if you were to look at this right off the bat, you might think, oh my gosh, that's so complicated. I don't know how to draw that. It might turn out really wonky and not to scale. So I think that her instructions are really awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on drawing that, and then I'll move through the other ones, and then you can follow along or choose your own. So just to remind you, this is the final project that we're aiming for. And as I start to draw all these plants, I want the two largest ones, the Joshua tree and the saguaro cactus, I want those to be a little bit further up the page, not quite starting in the center or anything, but just a little bit further back, because these smaller ones I'm going to draw a little bit lower to the bottom, and that's just going to give it the illusion that these are closer to the viewer in the foreground versus the two larger ones, which are a little bit further to the back, but not quite to where the mountain range starts. So let me get started. Really light. I'm going to go a little bit darker so you can see it on camera. You want to keep yours really light. So starting with the Joshua tree, I'm going to place mine to start right about here. I'm going to come in a little closer. There we go. And I'm going to follow her book step by step. I don't know if I can really fit it in the frame, not really, but go ahead and follow along with me. So actually, let's do it this way. So I'd really like to show you her instructions with what I end up doing. All right, there we go. So I'm going to start by making this kind of Y shape. Once again, definitely do yours a little bit lighter in pencil. I'm going to go darker so it shows up on camera. I think the idea when you're drawing these sort of things is because it's nature, trees are not perfectly straight. So it's good to have a little wobbliness to your lines. It's going to look way more natural. All right, so then the next step, it shows us what we've drawn and what we need to draw. So I'm going to add those on. I'm going to wobble my pencil while I do that. All right, so then on this part of it, we're going to draw those other branches. And it doesn't have to look exactly as she's done it here. Yours is probably going to end up looking a little bit different, just like mine is. So don't fret too much about making it look exact. All right, I'm going to draw here. This doesn't quite connect. Okay, and then up here. All right, and then we move down. There we go. So where we left off was drawing this, so we have a few to add up here. And then we have this one. I really like these step-by-step things because sometimes, say you looked at a reference photo of a Joshua tree, again, it's going to look really complicated, and until you break it down step by step like this, then you realize, oh, I can draw that. And then, you know, once you've finished, you can add as much detail as you want to, and you can continue to practice drawing these sort of things, and then from there, make them even more detailed if you want. All right, so I've left off here, and what the rest of this shows is that you would need to draw in these little, I don't know, foliage bits. Because we're watercoloring this, I'm leaving those off because I'm going to fill them in later with watercolor. And I don't want to have too many unnecessary pencil marks, but what you can do is maybe draw a little circle here just for yourself so you know that they'll go in. But I'm not going to pencil those in. I will end up inking on top of the watercolor later, but for now that's that. So I'm going to continue on and draw the rest of these. I'm going to speed it up a little bit, so feel free to pause this video and come back once you've filled everything in, but just consider your placement of your elements here. When you look at the page, you definitely want them to be spaced out enough. So for example, I have this one. This is kind of like the centerpiece of the botanicals because it's the largest one. So I definitely wanted that to be a little bit further to the background. I'm going to draw the saguaro next, probably also toward the background. And then I'm going to bring the not a prickly pear, forget the name. We're going to bring that one a little bit further forward. Same thing, I've drawn two of the, can't remember what those are called either, these prickly ones. Very good at knowing my desert plants. These prickly ones, I'm gonna have two of those, and then I have the ball cactus here. So I'm just kind of staggering where they are in the kind of foreground to background a little bit so that it adds more interest. And if I just did them straight across, it would just look, first of all, unrealistic. That's not how they would normally be in nature. And then second of all, it just wouldn't make for an interesting composition. So just vary where they are because they're at different heights and everything. It's just going to add more interest this way. So go ahead and put them down, or you can follow along as I speed this bad boy up. Okay, awesome. So we have our botanicals drawn in, and the next thing we need to do is add the rest of the scene. So in mine, I've made an Airstream style trailer. There's a link for some reference images if you want to look at them, or you can just make one up. We have some mountain ranges here, the moon, and a couple of rocks. So let's add those in now, and then come back here and we'll get started to paint. Okay, we're almost done drawing the scene. The last thing I wanted to draw in, and you'll see here in my example, is I wanted to add a little string of lights here. I felt like you're camping in the desert, it's dark. What more to set the scene in kind of that cozy mood than a string of lights? So the way I've chosen to do it is to draw a line connecting the saguaro with the Joshua tree as if they were just kind of strung up in the trees for a temporary little campsite here. And then draw little balls along the way. So we'll do that together. I'm just gonna make it look like it was tied here and then draw a little line across and connect it to the tree there somehow, and then just some balls here. You can kind of make yours more light bulb shaped if you wanted to, but I think circles get the point across. So there we go. Now that is our finished sketch. So we're going to dive in now to actually the masking fluid. So I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about it. Masking fluid is this weird gum rubbery sort of liquid that will solidify on the paper, turn a little rubbery, but what it does is it allows you to safely cover part of your painting that you don't want to get paint on. And that way you can paint over it and it's protected, and then you remove the masking fluid solidified and it comes right off. It doesn't tear or rip your paper, and then you can then fill in that spot. So for example, here I didn't want to get the area where the moon was because I know that the moon is a lot lighter than the rest of the sky. I didn't want to have to like carefully go around it, potentially creating like a line here that shows up too obviously, or get some of this dark blue paint into where the moon is. So I put masking fluid on it. Same thing with the lights and a few other elements. So we're going to do that together right now, and you'll see just how easy it is to use. Like I said, you might not have it on hand, but once you get it, I mean, I've had this bottle. It's a huge bottle. I've barely dented it, and it's going to last a long time. Also, just a fair warning, I have found masking fluid kind of smells a little gross, so don't be too put off by that. And also remember, you're using an old brush, an old beat up brush, not a really nice one. So let's dive in here. You can get it in different colors, like they have it in white, but I used to have white. I think I saw it somewhere, but I like to use the blue because it shows up a lot better when I put it on my paper. Okay. So I'm going to do it on the moon. You want to work relatively quickly. Don't go too slow because this stuff does dry fast once it's on the paper. So then you'll be kind of painting over the gumminess of it, and that gets a little bit weird and it might start peeling up when you don't want it to. And also make sure you rinse your brush often enough because it does dry in the bristles of the brush. And even though we're using an old brush, we don't want it to start drying in the bristles. It makes our work a little bit more difficult. So you see, I painted it on. It's gonna look shiny even when it's dry, but you can just kind of tap it and make sure. See, that one's still a little bit wet. If you don't get any back on your finger, it's dry. But go ahead and paint any areas that you don't want to get your background paint in. So the Airstream is large enough that I can easily go around that when I'm painting the mountains and the sand, but I think I'm going to put masking fluid on some of the smaller elements like the light bulbs here, probably some of the cacti. Maybe not this one as much because it's large and round, but this, I don't want to have to go in with my like my sand paint and kind of go in and out of each one of those. So if I can just put the masking fluid on, that'll be really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to speed it up, but follow along and I'll see you on the other side. All right, awesome. We're back now. We have put our masking fluid on. You'll see that I decided only to do it for a few of the, oh my gosh, I wish I had words, a few of the branches, for lack of a better word, of this plant, because I figured because I used different shades of green on my initial one, those might be the lighter shades, and then the darker ones will obviously easily cover up this background color. And I only did it for this one. I didn't end up putting it on there because my brush for my masking fluid is a little thicker than these lines, so I'm just going to have to make sure that my paint just goes right over it. And then, yeah, that's about it. So it's still a little wet here, but it doesn't matter. The one here on the moon, up on the sky is dry, so we are going to start with our paint. So I have chosen for my sky to use like a really dark kind of indigo-y blue, and I think I'm going to do that again for this version. So grab your paint, and since the sky is larger, I'm going to use a larger brush. So this is the round 8. Make your brush nice and wet. Get your color all wet and juicy. And dive in. So what I like to do with the sky is maybe have a few different shades of a dark blue on hand, so that as I paint it, a little water there, as I paint it, I can dab in some of the darker ones, some of the lighter ones, and change it up a little bit. And it just helps add a little bit of that variegation in there, which makes it really interesting. And if you're not working on a block, make sure that you tape your page down so that the edges don't curl up. But since I'm working on a block, I don't have to do that here. Also take bits of water, clean water, and just dab it in here, because as it dries, it's going to interact with the paint that's already on the page. and it's going to make these really cool blooms and swirls, and it's going to just make it really look interesting. So I like doing that. I'm going to be reaching across. I have some more paint over here on my other side. I'm just going to dab in there. It looks so cool. You can also just put water down first and do kind of a wet on wet technique if you want. I'm going to do a mix of both, a little wet on dry and a little wet on wet. Take some more of the dark and put that in, just like dab it in. I'm reaching from different palettes now, just I want to pull a few more colors in. Oh yeah, look how dark that is, looks so cool. And the beauty of masking fluid is when we get over here, oh magic, you can go right on top of where that moon is. You don't have to worry about going around it perfectly. And it repels the paint and keeps it off of that part of the paper. So it's actually really cool. It's one of those things that I have and I don't always think to use it. And then when I do, I'm like, I really should use this more. It saves me a lot of frustration. I should have worked my way over to where the moon was. I just got really excited to show you the working, the way the masking fluid works. So now I'm trying to quickly go back in here so I don't have any hard lines where I stopped painting. And while that's still wet, I want to dab in some more of the darker colors. Dab in some more water. I love to get those little blooms to form. They look really cool. Oop. The masking fluid is a little damp down there. Look how cool that is right here where I dabbed that water in. It's just spreading in the paint. It looks so awesome. All right, I'm going to take a few more shades of blue and just dab those in too for some variety. Sometimes it's easy to want to like dab it in and then swirl it and make it look a certain way, but it's easier to just let it do its own thing. All right, put a little bit of water here. Okay, I'm gonna let that sit. Ideally, I would be waiting until the sky is dry before continuing on to the next layer. I'm just gonna have to be really careful. I'm going to use like an amethyst, a darker purple color for this first mountain. And you can add as many mountain ranges as you want. If you have like a whole variety of a color you want to show off, like say you have a bunch of different purples, start with your darkest one in the foreground and work your way to the lightest in the back. And that could be really pretty. But I just chose to put two here. So this is my darker amethyst. And now again, because I added this masking fluid here over the cactus and these lights, that makes my job so much easier instead of trying to go in and out and like really go around every bit of it perfectly. And I'm doing the same thing. I have a couple darker purples, so I am grabbing from a few of them and just sort of letting it mix here on my brush and on the paper. My lavender here is still wet. I'm going to come as close as I can. If it touches, the lavender is going to bleed into this, and that's okay. I kind of think that looks cool. I'm not going to fret over it. I might embrace it. You can see it kind of pulling in here, that lighter spot. That's just the lavender seeping into the darker because I touched it with my brush. I kind of like that though. I think it's fun. that one. And last but not least, we need to just put the sand in. So I have kind of a peachy, I don't even know, I guess it's just a peach, kind of a beigey peach. All right. Our background, foreground, the back area of the painting, all the big stuff is done. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to come back and paint the botanicals and all the other parts of the scene so that I can actually see where I'm going. All right, we're back. All of our background layers are dry. Masking fluid's dry. So the next step is to fill in all these foreground details. And I'm going to start with the largest one, which is the Airstream here. So I'm going to take that size 8 brush again and a gray color. And if you happen to have some sort of metallic watercolors, it might be fun to actually paint this in silver, which I have some kind of opalescent color. I'm going to mix that in just because I can. Alright, so I don't want to do the tree yet because the Airstream is still wet. But what we can do is remove the masking fluid. So this is kind of fun in the way of like back in the day when we were in school and you would put glue on your hand and then peel it off. It's kind of like that. So take your finger and just sort of like rub it on top of the masking fluid until it kind of catches. And then once your the friction of your finger kind of catches it, then just keep rolling it off. And it's gonna be like a little, those like eraser scraps that you have if you're erasing something. And just do that to all of the masking fluid. Just make sure that the paint that is on top of it when you paint it over it has dried, so you don't get wet paint smudged everywhere. And just do that to all of them. I'll move that off. And you can even use what you take off to kind of pull off the rest too. Oop. Don't want to do that one because my Airstream's dry. Or my Airstream's wet, sorry. Ah. Sometimes the ball gets a little too big and you gotta go back to using your finger again. Oh, look at that. That was a good pull. That was fun. This last bit here. And make sure all the little bits are off. I'm going to come back and get those lights off once the Airstream's dry. But now it's time to start painting the plants, the botanicals. So I'm going to start with this one. I'm using a round 4 for this and using kind of a green gold color. I want this one to be a little bit brighter. It's a really pretty color. So I know this arm looks like a giant blob, but we will go back with the pens, and that's how we'll define those. So I'm going to continue painting all of these, and I will come back when they're done, and we will move on to the next step. But pretty much what we're doing is just pulling different shades of green and painting each one of those. So I will speed this up so you can watch but not have to listen to me blather on about nothing. And we'll be back. we only have a few steps left. So I've filled in all of the plants with different shades of green. If you could see in the time-lapse version of it, I worked from light to dark. I did some of these leaves with lighter shades of green, then worked my way up to dark. Same thing here. I did some lighter ones, and then I went in with darker just to add some dimension. And then with this one, I really like how this came out. I added some water in here, and it just made this really cool bloom effect. I just love that. Anyway, now let's go on and fill in the rest of the scene, and then we move into the ink. So this Airstream is dry, so I'm just going to take off the rest of the masking fluid here. I'm going to do it that way. Brush it on off. There we go. All right, so the last few things we have to fill in, the rocks. So we're taking a little bit more of that darker, or I'm sorry, that little more of that, like that lighter ochre color that we used for the sand, and we're just doing another layer of it on top. So it's the same color, just a little bit, it's going to be a little bit darker, a little more opaque. So we're going right on top. I'm doing it a little messy because rocks are jagged, especially ones that you find out in the desert. They're made of sand. They're kind of, you know, they're not very smooth. So that's going to dry. Then we're going to do this window. I'm just going to do, I think just a lighter blue. Even though it's at night. Actually, yeah. What am I doing? My example, I did a lighter blue, but it's at night. The lights would be on. So let's do a yellowy color. In fact, yeah, I'm going to do a yellow. I'm doing a really bright yellow because that's fun. Fill that in. And then in my example, I made the lights a metallic, kind of rose gold, I guess. And I did the moon in silver. For the sake of this one, I'm going to stick with something you might be more likely to have in your palette. So I'm just going to do yellow for all of those. Just kind of a brighter shade of yellow. Lemon yellow, I guess, would be the best option. I'm just going to fill those in. Trying not to turn my paper here so you can see it and not get too dizzy, but ordinarily I would be doing a much better job at painting these because I would turn my paper around to kind of be in an easier angle to maneuver. Alright, so the last thing I need to do are the lights. Oh, and the little fruit on the fake prickly pear cactus. Okay. And the fruit on this, I've seen them as like a magenta-y pinkish color, I guess. So that's what I'm going to go with. They're so small on this size paper that I'm literally just dabbing the brush tip on here. And again, these brushes have a nice fine point tip to them, which is awesome. You can do that, but I'm not like going crazy trying to make it perfect. I'm just dabbing the paint in there so you can get the idea. Because again, we're going to go in with the pen and add some more detail. So as far as painting goes, the last thing we have to do is add our shadows. So I think all of this should be dry. Yeah. So I'm going to take a little bit larger brush. I'm going to do the 6. And I'm taking this purple that I used here, maybe mixing some blue in it. And I'm just going to dab it messily underneath each of these things to be a shadow. I can just show you here. I think what I did in this was actually put some of the purple down and then dabbed some of the indigo blue even closer to the plant so that there was a variegation in the shadow. So I'm going to do some purple first. I'm kind of keeping it small near the plant and then just laying the belly of the brush down as I go further out and just dabbing it in. I'm not doing like a hard shape, a hard shadow. I'm going to dab some more paint in there. And then I'm going to add some of that blue in a little bit closer and let that spread out. Easy. You can even add a little water here on the outer edge. That was a lot of water, but you get the idea. I'm going to do that for all of these. I'm going to go in real quick and just do the purple for a couple of them. Dab it in. Because the thing with this kind of thing is that, like, your eye understands that that's meant to be a shadow. You're not looking at it and being like, oh, my shadow looks terrible and not realistic. Your eye knows that that's a shadow. And it's going to interpret it as such when you look at it. All right, I'm going to tilt that a little bit. I need to do some here, some under the rocks. I'm just dabbing it in. Put some of the blue in. Just a couple more. I'm going to do some underneath the trailer here. Just kind of like go in with the tip, line it up where you need it to be, and then lay the belly of the brush down just to let it spread. You can see I'm not being super careful here. This is meant to be messy and fun. Put more shadow there. So I'm not going for super precise. Take some of the blue, dab it in, and just make sure I've gotten all of my 3D elements. Yep, everything has a shadow. So we're going to come back and when this is dry and just add the ink and then we're done. Okay, it's time for the last step. Everything is dry. We're able to put our hands all over it and not mess anything up. So take your fine liner pens. So once again, I'm using the monoline pens from Pigeon Letters, and I'm using size 01, 03, and 05 for this. And I'm going to start with the 05. I'm going to tilt that a little bit. And the 05, the larger the number, the thicker the pen tip or nib is. So I'm going to use the thicker ones, the 05, to outline some of these larger shapes like the mountains and the horizon. That's the word. And maybe the airstream as well. And then I'm going to go smaller as I get into the more detailed stuff. So let's go ahead and keep a light hand. And like I said before, the good thing about these pens is that you don't have to hold it up straight up and down. You can hold it a little more natural. And keep a light hand and let it get wobbly. Let it get nice and wobbly in your hand. The 03. I think a lot of this is going to be done with the 03. So I'll start here with the Joshua tree. All right, so now I'm taking the thinnest one, the 01, and this is for my most fine details. So I'm just going to start over here on the left and just add some lines here in the saguaro. And again, this is where you would reference back to the Botanical Line Drawing book just to see what Peggy has suggested in there, but you can also go off the cuff too. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. Let's zoom it on out so you can see. So that's it. That's our watercolor and ink scene. I think that this is a really fun project to do if you've gone on a trip, or like I said, just go through the Botanical Line Drawing book and pick out a few favorites that you really want to draw and arrange them in a composition that feels pretty cool to you and create your own scene. Like this scene is just completely made up in my head um, based on what I found in the book. So feel free to make your own and do it that way. But I hope you enjoyed learning how to use masking fluid and use some watercolor and get some cool blooming effects, and how to add ink on top of it to add a little detail and definition. So I hope that was fun, and I look forward to bringing you more tutorials. Bye everybody!